In my first few minutes with Redguard, I thought it might be an adventure game, because while the intro had some fighting, most of the rest of my time was following a trail. I talked to the guy on the ship, and he sent me to a bar. The bar sent me to a temple. I talked to the guy in the temple, and he sent me to a park. Now on the way, I did talk to some townspeople wandering the streets. I was delighted by how in-depth the personalities of these townspeople were. Their histories, their interests. One guy talking about dwarves, the person who looks after the park, and the prostitute talking about how the owner of the bar doesn't like what she does, but if you need to know what's going on in town, he's the guy to talk to. But then in the park, I went behind a waterfall and I found a dungeon. It really was like a Zelda dungeon. It made me realize that, oh, this is an Elder Scrolls Zelda game. Of course, this is a 3D action adventure game on the PC in the late 90s, so Ocarina of Time it is not. It's not only a Zelda dungeon because there are small combat encounters and the whole thing is kind of divided room to room, but because action in one area will affect other areas, like blowing up a wrecked ship and having the explosions make the stalactites fall from the ceiling so then you can jump on them. I want to mention the voice acting. During most of the 90s, it ranged from great if you had a professional crew like Day of the Tentacle, to decent like Half-Life, to this.
Leaders like their gardens full and the smell of success in the air.
Redguard has everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it was the characters more than anything that delighted me to this world. Even the pirates you fight right at the start of the game when your ship is being taken over.
Get below is what the pilot said to the wet-eared knaves before him.
This one pirate has such a strange manner of speaking. He's almost philosophizing while you're fighting him. It really endeared me, and it made me think of how I'd love to play a game where even the lowly grunts, the cannon fodder you fight just as a matter of course, are this fleshed out, making you wonder who they were and if maybe you could have gotten through without having to kill them. That sense of scope is the strength of Redguard. The intro talks about how Stros Makai is being overtaken by the Empire and all the political turmoil that ensues. When you go there, that's obviously on the minds of many of the townspeople, and it turns out it plays quite distinctly into the narrative. While there is this grand sense of politics and dragons, very epic, you're just going back to town to save your sister. You've heard she's disappeared and you want to find her. Easily relatable and a great jumping off point for getting further embroiled in larger stakes. Unfortunately, my time in the dungeon was where my esteem of Redguard really plummeted. First off, because of the issues I had with the movement. There was a lot of saving and loading. That was common in many late 90s, early 2000s games on the PC, where you weren't sure if you were going to die in the next room, and checkpointing was in its infancy. Of course, in those games, you usually had a hotkey like F5 or F7 to quick save and quick load, and not interrupt the flow of your gameplay more than a second or so. But in Redguard, I had to go into the menu and save each time. That really interrupted flow, but then so did the movement. It's very fiddly. I want to use the word janky, but I don't think that's descriptive enough. There's a stop-start nature to the movement. It's not easy to line yourself up with ledges, and the jump doesn't behave the way you want it to. There's this area where I had to jump off a cliff, hit a mushroom, bounce onto a second mushroom, and bounce off to a third small mushroom to finally land on safe ground, and geez, that took me a while. Just lining it up. There's no good way to get a great vantage point. If this were made later, you could see how the camera would give you the best view for accomplishing such a feat. To be honest, that's kind of my overall thought of Redguard. I'd love to play a modern version of this game. The world and its characters are very endearing. Just make sure the voice acting has a consistent quality to it. Play the game with a controller and have the fluidity of something like an Assassin's Creed with animations and movement. Keep the general ideas of the dungeons and towns, but yeah, just give them a modern polish. I think this could be wonderful. So, should you play Redguard? Well, if you have an affinity for late 90s PC action adventure games, I think you could have some fun here, especially if Elder Scrolls Tomb Raider sounds good to you. On the other hand, it's a game you have to fight to play. The movement is not altogether fair or intuitive. Sometimes it's difficult to work out what the game wants you to do to progress to the next room, and yeah, it's really a game of two halves. I love the parts that weren't the dungeon, but the dungeon really soured my enjoyment. As always, I'd love to hear what you think of Redguard and this video down in the comments. If you liked the video, why not buy me a coffee? There's a link in the description. If you'd like to help me out in other ways, please give the video a like, share it on your favorite social media sites, or subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, I hope you're all having a wonderful day.